Welcome to LeaderCast, episode 218. You're listening to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sara Thomas, providing you with resources to navigate the challenges and opportunities of courageous, Christ-centered leaders.
Well, today we want to talk about how leaders create hope in different ways. Specifically, how your strengths show up and create hope for different people. We mentioned this in passing last week. We want to dive into it a little deeper this week.
So before we do, let me remind you that you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/218. And if you're thinking, they're still talking about hope? Yes, we're still talking about hope. And we're going to be talking about hope throughout the year. And yes, I just did a little play on words there because that's also the name of a devotional that we are putting together that you can find information about on the show notes page. Once again, at transformingmission.org/218.
Sara, wouldn't you agree that no two of us have the same combination of strengths and that we lead in different ways, so we might communicate hope in different ways? Is there a way that we can look at this?
Yeah, I would say that you just nailed it. So why don't we take two CliftonStrengths that show up often for Christ-centered leaders and have that conversation?
So those two strengths would be, what do you want to work on today?
You know what? Let's take learner and connectedness.
Okay, learner and connectedness. So first, let's start with learner. Tell us about learner.
So how might someone, and we're talking about two of the 34 CliftonStrengths, some of you may know it as Strength Finder, and the talent theme of learner. So for this one, because the process of learning excites you, you might communicate best by teaching others what you're learning, or creating an environment of hope by teaching others what you're learning. You might share information and resources that are helpful with others that gives you an opportunity to learn. So maybe if there's a new initiative that you're exploring, a theme for a sermon series, create some opportunities for others to learn and ask if their learning needs are being met. That's another way that folks that have this talent can really create hope, is by inviting others to reflect on what are they learning and are those their needs for that journey of learning and growth being met. And just a little aside, that is especially important with the upcoming generations, Generation Z and millennials. They want opportunities to learn and grow. All of that to say, in the process of using this talent and really diving into a growth journey and either teaching or helping other people to learn or sharing what you are learning, you're going to create hope.
Okay, that's learner. How would that work with connectedness?
So for folks who have connectedness, they have faith in the links between all things. And sometimes part of what I see with folks who lead with connectedness is sometimes they can be surprised at the connections that people don't see, because it's such a natural part of the way that you view the world and relate to people that you're just caught off guard when other people don't see it. So you can create hope by naming those connections, by zooming out and providing a different or wider perspective and helping people to see the connections that they might be missing.
Well, you've heard Sara describe learner and connectedness. So now try to imagine these two leaders serving alongside one another. They have a message to communicate. They want to share hope with Christ-centered leaders. So, Sara, how might the first person who leads with learner go about leading others and creating hope?
So you're looking now for some examples, because I've given you how they might do it in broad terms. So let me give you a few examples that come to mind. Folks who have the learner talent, many of them you're going to find they have a collection of books. They enroll in classes on their own. They might even have YouTube channels that they follow because they enjoy the process of learning. So that's where this first one comes from. Share the strengths-based leadership book with people because it offers insights for all 34 strengths about how, as a leader, you can create hope. So that might be one. Another one might be to share Shane Lopez's book, Making Hope Happen, so that people can learn more about what hope is about and how you can learn to be a person of hope and how you can teach hope and how you can help others experience hope. In the context that we are in, another example might be lead a Bible study on hope or a book study about one of the books that I just mentioned. You might call people together and invite them to bring their top 5 strengths and share how creating hope would work with the group that you have assembled, or if there is something a mission that you are engaged in locally or globally, maybe share the strengths that you have and then talk about how your participation in leveraging those strengths might create hope around that specific initiative that you are a part of.
So, Sarah, let's get more specific and strategic.
There goes Tim leveraging his strengths.
You're in the 23rd month of a pandemic and you're feeling weary, but there's a devotional you're putting together. Which of these suggestions excites you and why?
So Tim's bringing this to real life. Not that I'm feeling weary. I may be feeling weary of the month of January as we're recording this, but that's all. But to your question about which one of those suggestions excite me, I think for me, I would invite people together to explore their Clifton strengths and hope and what the intersection of their strengths and hope really are around a strategic initiative. And in that, I would want to share with them suggestions and have a conversation about where and how they're experiencing hope to encourage them to share with other Christ-centered leaders that story in the devotional hope throughout the year. So you see the bridge that I'm building. I'm going from what is your specific strength and how might you experience hope to reflecting on that, to then inviting people to write something to share with others in the devotional hope throughout the year. What about you, Tim? This is one of your top 5s.
Learner. Yes.
And maybe it's not any of those suggestions. Maybe you have something completely different.
I'm a whole lot more selfish with learner. It's more about what I can learn and then parsing it out little by little. Oh, this is what I learned. So I'm not sure that I'd be very helpful being hopeful at those moments. Now, you may see that a bit differently, but I'm learning in every situation. I mean, I every day I pray, help me learn what I need to learn in every situation and circumstance today. And I think it gets incorporated into my life. And so it gets incorporated into relationships, which then is the way I offer hope.
Part of what I heard you say a couple of things about your learner strength. You said, I'm selfish with my learner strength because it's about what I'm learning. And then once I've learned it, then I'm sharing it with others. So when it comes to experiencing hope and sharing hope with others, what are you learning about hope right now that you would want to share with others? It may not be something new.
One of the things I like about you, Sarah, is you're able to put me on the spot so easily.
Those stealth coaching skills.
I did not know until a few years ago that hope was built into who I am. Part of what I discovered, and when we talk about strengths, and I've learned this from you, is that some of the strengths that we have, if we're not using them the way they're intended to be used, they end up in what is called the basement. And so I spent a lot of time in the basement in my life because I didn't use the strengths or the things that God had given to me in the way they were intended to be used. But as I've learned and as I've grown, I can find hope in just about anything, because I don't think we live in a hopeless time. And I don't think we're in hopeless situations or circumstances. Are they the way I want them to be? No. Is it going the way I want it to go? No. But does that mean there's no hope? No. And so if I'm with somebody who is particularly and experiencing hopelessness, or feeling like they are stuck, or feeling like they've made some mistakes, or people don't like them. I mean, pastors feel that all the time when they get resistance. They make it personal. I'm trying to help them see a way to get around those things, to see that there's something better on the other side. That's hope.
So I'm just going to point out that Tim did some strength swapping right there and jumped into his strategic strength as I'm hearing it. It doesn't surprise me, Tim, hearing you say what you said about the learner talent, because as I have watched you lead and interacted with you now for what, a dozen years, you are so firmly planted in that strategic strength in terms of who you are as a leader that it's always going to start there. And then you're trying to identify see if what I'm saying back to you resonates at all. You're trying to identify with your learner strength, what am I learning along this path that can get woven in here and would be helpful in this context and in this conversation or to this person. Is that fair?
You said it much more clearly than I did. So yes, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm just reflecting back what I heard and bringing two strengths together. So do we want to jump into connectedness?
Sure. That's the second person who we're talking about, leading with connectedness. So how do they go about leading others and creating hope?
Yeah. So let me remind you what we said at the top of this episode about people who have this talent. So people with the connectedness talent have faith in the links between all things. That's the big thing that I want to highlight for you about this talent. So, well, it's not hopeful to report that 850,000 people have died from COVID-19 in the United States. Collective grief is certainly present. So, for someone with the connectedness talent theme, one thing that they might do to help people experience and create hope as they journey with grief is to bring those individuals together to acknowledge that grief. And again, that's probably not sounding very hopeful, but think about a time that you have experienced grief and the people that created space for you to give voice to that and what that might look like. And the other thing that I'll remind you here is that we're experiencing grief in lots of different ways. Certainly 850,000 people have died. And so the impact of those individual lives on the people who love them and people who worked with them, people who were their neighbors, continue on down the line. That is huge. There are also those moments for our children that they missed a recital, or they didn't get to go to the camp that they were planning on going to. And there's grief there as well. And so don't fall into the trap of comparative suffering. Well, that wasn't as bad as. Grief is grief. And we're experiencing grief right now. So for someone with connectedness, normalizing, and hear what I'm saying, I'm not saying minimizing, I'm saying normalizing that it is happening and connecting that grief to the hope of Jesus is going to be and can be a powerful way that someone with this talent theme might go about leading others and creating hope.
This isn't going to be hopeful either. It doesn't sound hopeful, but isn't that what pastors do at funerals?
Yes. It's that opportunity for us to name the grief that we're experiencing collective and to name the hope that we have. But Tim, think about how many funerals haven't happened over the past 2 years and how many people haven't been able to experience that.
But would that be a place right now, as we're talking about it, giving somebody an idea, gathering some people together to say, I know what you have not been able to experience. Can we take a step toward that now?
That is exactly what we are pointing to. And I say that doesn't sound very hopeful simply because we're talking about grief. But I think as we move through the different seasons of grief, that's what people are longing for, is that hope and reminding people of the hope that we have in Jesus. Okay, we're going to stop dwelling on that one and move on to another example. Another way that this person might lead and create hope is they might lift up and celebrate the different parts of the body that are functioning to either keep ministries going or the different ways that people are sharing their gifts with the collective team, the congregation, whatever it may be. The other thing that I think this person might find it second nature to do is to remind people what is constant. And here, simply reminding folks that the love of God that we know in Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And pausing to reflect on what hasn't changed in 2 years and lifting up what still remains. The love of God that we know in Jesus is still there. The church is still present. We are still the body of Christ. And so finding ways to name what hasn't changed and what won't change, either with a small group of people or as a community, and to celebrate the enduring love of God at the center of all we say and do, might be a way that this person could create hope for the people that they're leading. And then the last thought or idea might be that they look at a specific age group. And I'll just take teenagers, because I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about how this pandemic absolutely positively would not have worked when we were teenagers, because we would have just given one another COVID-19 by hanging out on porches and sitting in our cars with one another, because we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have social media and we didn't have Zoom or FaceTime or any of the things that the technology that the teenagers have today. Looking at how teenagers are navigating the pandemic through their ease with technology and looking at the human connection there and the relationships that have flourished. Now, yes, you can go down a whole different route with all of that, but remember, we're talking about hope here. And so lifting up the good and the transformative stories in the midst of that.
So we've looked at learner and we've looked at connectedness. So let's invite people to get more specific and strategic. That's the same kind of question. Even though you're not weary, we're talking to people who are weary. That in the last 23 months of the pandemic, which of these suggestions excite you and why? Which one of these would you choose? And I don't think connectedness is in your top 5, is it?
It's not my top 5, but it is in my top 10. So I still consider it one of my dominant strengths. I'm thinking about our listeners, and you're in your 23rd month of a pandemic and you're feeling weary, but Sunday's coming. Which of the things that have been named excite you? And we're walking through this to invite you to do the same thing with your strengths. So for me, where I would land on that question is, because I've done this, talking with friends who have teenagers or folks that work with teenagers, and celebrate their ingenuity, their perseverance, their creativity, and encourage them to share those stories with other Christ-centered leaders. I switched the question. So if it was about the devotional, to do that in and through Hope Throughout the Year. If it was on Sunday morning, to raise that up on Sunday morning. And you might not be naming specific names, but the situations. This is a place, and I think part of why I landed on that one, that as I think about and reflect on the past 2 years, I don't think that there has been enough attention given to all of the amazing things that our young people have done and have been able to endure, and the ways that they have persevered. We've focused on what isn't going right for them and what is problematic. But I also see and hear an awful lot of good things. And my concern is if we don't capture those and share those, there's going to be a narrative about the generation that is in middle school and high school right now that just isn't true. I just see a group of people who, oh my gosh, their perseverance and their creativity and their ingenuity is off the charts. So Tim, what thoughts do you have on that one? And maybe it's not about that talent, but about any of those scenarios, and then we'll do some reverse engineering.
One of the things that I think that any of us can do as leaders is to remind people what has not changed. And that's the love of God we know in Jesus. And that will not change. It doesn't make any difference of all the changes around us, whether we like them or not, whether they're good for us or not. The one thing that does not change is God's love. And so being able to remind people of God's love in Jesus in whatever situation and circumstance, I think is an offer of hope, because that's where you can plant your feet. And when everything else seems to be shaky or crumbling, you still got the solid, if I may use the image from the scripture, the solid rock to stand upon. And that's where I make a connection at this point.
Yeah, and part of what I appreciate about you, Tim Bias, is, I don't know where consistency is in your 34, but you are so consistent in partnering your strategic and futuristic strength to be a person of hope. You're looking forward and you're seeing what is coming with your futuristic talent. And at the very same time, you're helping people to navigate that and guiding them in the direction that is filled with hope. And that comes in and through a relationship with Jesus.
I don't know what to say. Thank you. That's good. I'm glad that's me. I feel good about that.
Well, and part of what you've just demonstrated, Tim, is that, and why I said to you, it might not be about the talent, but about one of the examples is different strengths can do the same thing. They're just going to go about it in a different way. And so whether you have any of the Clifton strengths that we have mentioned on this episode today or not, what we wanted to illustrate for you today is that there are many ways that you can create hope as a leader. And you're uniquely gifted to do it in specific ways. So claim who God's created you to be, take a step back and ask yourself, how's God gifted me, and how might I use those gifts to share hope with others and share hope with the people that I am in relationship with. I feel like we should put the Nike commercial here. Just do it.
Well, all I could add to that is that whoever you are listening, you are a person of hope. That's the way God's created you. And to live into who you're created to be, you're going to find ways of offering hope. It's not going to be the way I do it. It's not going to be the way Sara does it. It's going to be the way you do it. And there's a time where you need to become comfortable with that, claim it for yourself, and discover the ways or develop the ways you can offer hope to the people around you, because they too have that seed of hope within them. And that's part of what our work is as leaders.
The image that's coming to mind, Tim, and it's a silly image, but I mean it in a serious way, is put on your hope glasses. Are the things that you're seeing and the way that you're viewing the world, is it through the love of God that we know in Jesus? That's what I mean by hope glasses. When we do that, it's really hard not to experience hope. Even when things are crappy, it's really hard not to experience hope.
Sara, we've gone through 2 months, maybe 8 episodes now of talking about hope. One of the things I want to say, and this is coming out of some of my own experience, positive and negative, is that, just to remind people, hope is not wishful thinking. Hope is not pie in the sky. Hope is not wanting something that you don't think you can have, but you just wish you could have it. We're talking about a concrete fulfillment of God's plan and purpose in your life and in the lives of the people around you. Because we know, as we started this episode, that we're resurrection people. We know that all that we face, that all that's trying to drag us down, and all the places where we spent time, even in this episode, talking about grieving, that there is something better coming on the other side. And I'm not talking about in heaven. I'm talking about down the street. I'm talking about around the corner. I'm talking about when we can understand and claim where we are and know where we're going, there's hope. Because then we can navigate, negotiate, whatever it is that you have to do to get around the barriers that seem like, I can't do this any longer. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. Just remember, God's love's the same. God's still with you. God's sending people to you to walk with you so you can get around those things to get to where God intends for you to be.
So before Tim does an altar call, let me just remind you that you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/218. And in all seriousness, if you need to rewind and play again what Tim just said, to hear it again, and to hear it again tomorrow, and to hear it again the next day, so that you can be reminded that you are a person of hope, and that God has gifted you with unique talents and strengths. Do it. The episode's not going anywhere. Keep playing it over and over again. And remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.